Hello and welcome back to Fatboss TV. We are back from our annual hibernation, and today we are having our first look at one of the Castle Nathria raid bosses on the Shadowlands beta. We're going to be talking about the Council of Blood.
So this encounter, aside from its edgy name, actually has quite a few cool ideas. The fight takes place in a ballroom inside the castle, and you're expected to participate in the dance, or you just die. Like your typical council fight, you're faced against 3 bosses, and once one boss goes down, the others heal back to full, and each unlock one new unique ability. Let's jump straight in and have a quick go through of the bosses and the order in which we think you'll kill them on live servers.
So first we think you should kill Baroness Frida. She is a caster that is tame at the beginning but unlocks nasty abilities when the others die. She'll do a small AoE around her, and she'll apply a health reduction debuff on the tank that does require a taunt swap, or you can cheese it with immunities or spell reflex. Regardless of which boss dies first, she will gain the Scarlet Letter ability, which will teleport a random player to either of the far ends of the ballroom and will root them. Around 8 seconds later, this player will take lethal damage which is split between people nearby, requiring at least 1 or 2 other players to survive it. If you're actually going to deal with this ability, then we recommend that you keep the bosses in the middle of the room so at least you can have people reach either of the far ends when she randomly teleports someone. Now, if she is the only remaining boss, she'll be summoning waves of angry servants that will throw food at random people. Now, these didn't really do any damage during testing, but if they are going to do damage, these could be pretty spicy, especially because of the new AoE cap and the way that they spawn in, they're kind of along the sides of the room, making it quite difficult to group them up.
So after you've killed Frida, you'll want to kill Nicholas next. He doesn't need tanking until another boss has died, as he just keeps marking a player's location and then charges towards them, stunning anyone in his path. He'll also occasionally throw down a shield towards a boss, which reduces the damage that the boss takes by a ton until the shield is destroyed or the boss is moved far away from it. After one of the bosses has been killed, he will stop doing his charge and instead will unlock a frontal cone that is aimed towards the tank. This deals very high damage split between all players hit, so you need to make sure as a tank you're either facing him towards the raid or the raid moves to you instead. When he's the last boss, he will summon 2 giant adds that will fixate random people and chase them down, hitting them hard with their melee attacks. This isn't too bad to deal with, the fixated targets just need to make sure they keep moving away from them just to minimise the amount of times they're hit. However, the entire raid does need to watch out, because the adds will refixate new targets. At first glance, the idea seems to be just kill the adds off and then go back to nuking the boss. However, when the boss was supposed to spawn a new set, it appears that it can't if 2 are currently active, so potentially on live you might be able to just ignore them, kite them around and just nuke the boss instead.
Now, the last boss that we think you should kill is Lord Stavros. He frequently summons a wave of dancers that will dance across the room. You just need to weave around their paths just to avoid getting hit by them. Alternatively, you can also leave the dance floor itself, but doing so will make you take pretty high ticking damage until you return, so we don't recommend it. He also charges through tanks with a lunge which didn't seem to be working properly, but it looks like you should try and face him in a direction so that his charge doesn't hit many other players. Now, after one boss has died, he will now get a new ability that will tether 2 players together. These people need to stand quite close to each other just to reduce the damage the tether does, as well as keep moving, as you do have these little zones spawning underneath you, and if you stand within them, you'll take quite high burst damage. Now, when he's the last boss just by himself, he will spawn dancing fools that are supposed to randomly path around the room, stunning anyone in their way. It is recommended that you CC these mobs and dodge them until they become vulnerable to damage around 30 seconds later, similar to how the Skitra wall works. During testing, these mobs just kind of bugged out at the edge of the room, doing nothing for us, but it seems like they'll be pretty easy to deal with. So that's all that the bosses do. On top of this, there are a couple other things that you need to be aware of whilst fighting them. You'll get these big red swirly circles to dodge, and you'll also be gaining stacks of a dot debuff. These stacks are reset whenever a boss dies, or when the dance phase begins, whenever a boss reaches 50% health.
When this happens, all bosses will leave the encounter space and each player will be given a spotlight to go stand under. Once you reach that location, you'll then be given a vehicle bar with 4 moves on it. The game will then tell you to hit one of 4 buttons, either prancing forward, boogieing down, sashaying left, or shimmying right. After you've pressed the correct button 4 times, the fight then just returns to normal. If at any point you press the wrong button, you're teleported out of the encounter space onto a balcony where you're stunned for 30 seconds, out of line of sight. Sometimes you could survive this and just return back to the fight afterwards, but based on what bosses were up at the time and what mechanics were going out, this wasn't always possible and you just sat there slowly ticking down to your death. To add, if you don't reach your spotlight in time, you will just instantly die. So it felt really important to make sure that you're near the far end of the room where the bosses initially spawned from, because this is the closest location to where all the spotlights were. And this dance mechanic is the main reason why we decided to kill the Baroness first, because if you're in a Scarlet Letter, you can't reach your dance location in time and you will just die. But that's the encounter, and that's all the mechanics in play, and if the fight remains similar to what we tested on beta, it's probably quite likely you'll want to keep our kill order by killing off Baroness first, then Nicholas, and then Stavros. This seems best to avoid all the nasty overlaps.